Hello, BookTube. We're back with Arnold Bennett for our essay. This one's a bit longer than the others have been. It's called The Literary Periodical. It was published in the New Age, 8th September 1910, under the pseudonym of Jacob Tonson. I have just had the news of a purely literary paper which is shortly to be started. I do not mean a paper devoted to literary criticism chiefly, but chiefly to creative work. This will be something of a novelty in England. Its founders are two men who possess, happily, a practical acquaintance with publishing. The aim of the paper will be to print and to sell imaginative writing of the highest character. Its purpose is artistic and neither political nor moral. Dangers and difficulties lie before an enterprise of this kind. The first and practical difficulty will be the difficulty of obtaining the high-class stuff in sufficient quantity to fill the paper. The rate of pay will not and cannot be high, and authors capable of producing really high-class stuff, stuff high-class in execution as well as intention, are strangely keen at getting the best possible remuneration for it. Idle to argue that the genuine artists ought to be indifferent to money. They are not. And what is still more curious, they will seldom produce their best work unless they really do want money. This is a fact which they stand against all the sentimental denyings of dilettante. And of course, genuine artists are quite right in getting every cent they can. The richest of them don't get enough. But even if the rates of pay of the new organ are high, the difficulty would still be rather acute because the whole mass of really high class stuff produced is relatively very small. High class stuff is like radium, and the number of men who can produce it is strictly limited. There are dozens and scores of men who can write stuff which has the mannerisms and external characteristics of high class stuff, but which is not high class. Extinct exotic periodicals such as the Yellow Book, the Savoy, the Dial, the Anglo-Saxon, and such publications as the Neolith richly prove this. What was and is the matter with all of them is literary priggishness and dullness. One used to read them more often as a duty than as a pleasure. A great danger is the inevitable tendency to disdain the public and to appeal only to artists. Artists, like washerwomen, cannot live on one another. Moreover, nobody has any right to disdain the public. You will find that, as a general rule, the greatest artists have managed to get and to keep on good terms with the public. If an artist is clever enough, if he is not narrow, insolent, and unbalanced, he will usually contrive, while pleasing himself, to please the public or a public. It is his business to do so. If he does not do so, he will proves himself incompetent. He is merely mumbling to himself, just as the finite connotes the infinite, so an artist connotes the public. The artist who says he doesn't care a fig for the public is a liar. He may have many admirable virtues, but he is a liar. The tragedy of all the smaller literary periodicals in France is that the breach between them and the public is complete. They are unhealthy because they have not sufficient force to keep themselves alive, and they make no effort to acquire that force. They scorn the force. They are kept alive by private subsidies. A paper cannot be established in a fortnight, but no artistic paper which has no reasonable prospect of paying its way ought to continue to exist, for it denotes or demonstrates nothing but an obstinacy which is ridiculous. The first business of the editor of an artistic periodical is to interest the public in questions of art. He cannot possibly convince them till he has interested them up to a point of regular listening to him. Enthusiastic artists are apt to forget this. It is no use being brilliant and conscientious on a tub at a street corner unless you can attract some kind of crowd. The public has just got to be considered. You may say that it is not easy to make any public listen to the truth about anything. Well, of course, it isn't, but it can be done by tact and tact and tact. I do not think that there is a remunerative public in England for any really literary paper which entirely bars politics and morals. England is not an artistic country in the sense that Latin countries are artistic, and no end can be served by pretending that it is. Its serious interests are political and moral. Personally, I fail to see how politics and morals can be separated from art. I should be very sorry to separate my art from my politics, and I am convinced that the conductors of the new organ will perceive later, if not sooner, that the political and moral altercations must not be kept out of their columns. At any rate, they will have to be propagandist, pugilistic, and even bloodthirsty. They will have to formulate a creed and to try to ram it down people's throats. To print merely so many square feet of the best obtainable imaginative stuff and to let the stuff speak for itself will assuredly not suffice in this excellent country. My mind returns to the exceeding difficulty of obtaining the right contributors. English editors have never approached the importance of this, appreciated the importance of this. The English manufacturers sit still and wait for customers, so English editors sit still and wait for contributors. The interestingness of the new age, if I may make an observation which the editorial pen might hesitate to make, is due to the fact that contributors have always been searched for zealously and indefatigably. They have been compelled to come in, sometimes with a lasso, sometimes with a revolver, sometimes with a lure of flattery, but they have been captured. American editors are much better than English editors in the supreme matter. The profound truth has not escaped them that good copy does not, as a rule, fly is unbidden at the office window. They don't idiotically pretend that they have far more of the right kind of stuff than they know what to do with, as does the medium fatuous English editor. They cajole, they run around, they hustle. The letters which I get from American editors are one of the joys of my simple life. They are no English, they are not, they are un-English. They write, "Won't you be good enough to let us hear from you?" Or, "We are anxious," underlined, "to see your output." Imagine that from an English editor, and they contrive to say that what they mean picturesquely. One editor wrote me, we want material that will hit the mark without producing either insomnia or heart failure. As editor as an editor capable of such self-expression endears himself at once to my possible contributor, to any possible contributor. And above all, they do not fear each other as ours do, nor tremble at the thought of Mrs. Grundy, I mean the best ones. A letter which I received only a few days ago ended this: "We are not running the magazine for the benefit of the young person. We are not afraid of the realism as long as it is interesting. Hoping to hear from you." I lay these paragraphs respectively at the feet of the conductors of the new paper. I'm not sure what the new paper he's referring to is. It would take a little while to figure out that around, I guess, September-ish or maybe into 1911 what new paper started, which shouldn't be too difficult, but there might be a lot of them. So, but I found it interesting. Like it's sort of typical of the time, but I always question this to a certain extent because I think it depends on the person, and you need to know more about that person to make a snap judgment on the way it's written. There's conventions of how you say things, And his convention here is that there are dozens and scores of men who can write stuff which has all the mannerisms and external characteristics of high class stuff. Um, and then he says, high class stuff is like radium, and the number of men who can produce it is strictly limited. Now, he's saying men all the time, so he's not saying women. But that was a convention, and it was excluded to a certain extent as well, women. However, before I would jump to the conclusion to say that he's sexist and doesn't think women, I would like to know more of this, because I say it's a convention of writing. But and some of them do say and women, but it's interesting that he mentions 3 times in a row just men. So it makes me wonder. As I said, don't know enough about Arnold Bennett to know if he was exclusive that way, if he was chauvinist and thinking that only men could write well. But I don't think that's the case from what I've seen. So I think he's just falling back on convention of writing, using the conventions of mankind, that kind of thing that was just so prevalent at the time that everybody used, or most used. And even like I've read stuff that women have written, and they use the word mankind as well. So it was just as I say, it's a convention at the time. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting because he says it in like very short periods, men, men, men. So but it was interesting again as well, and I don't think that has changed for literary magazines at all. I don't think any of that has changed. Well, other than the fact of you having men and women writing, but it's the fact of having high class stuff, the quality for it, except where he says the aspect of even the ones that make the most still don't make enough. Well, I'm not sure if he envisioned the millions and millions of pounds and dollars that some authors are raking in today. He would never have probably envisioned that, thinking that it would be possible. Anyway, there ends the essay today, and I will see you tomorrow for the last of Arnold Bennett for a while. Take care.